Hey, welcome to Timber Talk. This is a new podcast series where we're going to be unearthing stories right across the timber sector, from operators to managers to foresters to landowners. We want to cover the spectrum of issues and we want to give you something useful to listen to whilst you're driving or working in the forest. I'm your host, Neil Stoddart, working for Creel Maritime, and this is Timber Talk. Morning and welcome to edition 1 of the Timber Talk podcast. This is a new series whereby over the coming weeks we're going to be talking about all things forestry, machines and timber related. I'm really glad to welcome this morning a friend of mine, Callum McIntosh, MD of Highland Hammer Hire and past president of the Scottish Plant Owners Association. And today's topic, okay, it's a little bit heavy duty, is going to be alternative fuels. Welcome, Callum.
Thanks for having me, Neil. Do you want to maybe tell me a bit about what sparked this idea off of the podcast first, because I'm really excited to be here.
I've just kind of got into podcasts myself, listening to a few, do a lot of miles driving, and started listening to a few. And it struck me that we've got foresters, people working in the industry, machine operators, timber hauliers, all with a lot of time to kill. The nature of work in forestry, okay, you're pulling levers, you're concentrating, but a lot of time to listen to podcasts, and I felt it was time we had a kind of vehicle, a podcast for us. So for operators, drivers, guys out in the field, foresters, okay, generally we might get onto some more heavy topics, but just something guys can listen to. It's not going to be too heavy duty. I'm sure we'll have a laugh along the way, but just something for the industry.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I do a lot of miles myself, and I've spent a lot of hours out in machines, out in the hill or out in the wilderness, West Coast. And podcast can be a really valuable tool for just keeping the days going and passing the time.
Absolutely, and hopefully, it can be, as I say, not heavy duty, but educational. We can cover some topics that the guys out there, it can be relevant to them. I'm sure they can text in, and yeah, we're open to suggestions of what sort of topics to cover. Today we started off with alternative fuels. It's something I'm passionate about. Maybe the listeners won't know, but Creel Maritime, a company I run, we've got 2 EV HGVs that we're looking after. One is run by James Jones, the other one by Scott Log in Inverness. So that was an 18-month project to get electric HGVs on the road. And yeah, a lot of people say they won't work. A lot of people were against it. Now we've got them. It seems like the hard work's done. We're proving them. They're working. Electric lorries do work. Yeah, there's a lot of haters. Yeah, there'll be problems. But it just shows it can be done, and I think this is a space which is really fast moving. There's all sorts of things. We've got hydrogen, we've got hybrid, we've got electric, we've got H-fuel, we've got alternative synthetic fuels, which is why I wanted to bring you in, Callum, because you've got a great depth and breadth of knowledge across that machinery sector. Forestry is fairly niche. We've got harvesters, forwarders, timber trucks. They're the 3 main constituent parts of what we do. Your world is full of all sorts of machines, from diggers to crushers to loaders, and really just to get your views on where you see it going in the bigger world of plant, because that will feed down into the forestry machine.
Yeah, I think the machinery sector is definitely lagging behind the road going equipment sector, and you've demonstrated that with the HGV side, that far more forward thinking, way more ahead of the game, and a lot more receptive to alternative solutions. But the machinery sector has still got a long way to go. I would say probably because of the remoteness of most job sites as well. It plays a big part in the actual solution that's applicable.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a couple of years ago now. I had some high hedrons from Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Forestry out. We did a bit of a road trip, and they were really shocked, I think, and surprised to see how remote some of the plant in forestry is. So we took to see a tiger cat harvester away down a brash mat, and we were all puzzled as to how we'd ever, recharge that if it was to be electric. How are we going to store hydrogen in the forest if it was to be hydrogen? So there are some fairly major hurdles in forestry, but also I would say forestry is innovative. It's quick on its feet, so we will be early adopters and trying to push this tech. So reading some of the literature, I did see that there's various excavators now. I think there's Volvo. I was interested to see Liebherr.
That's right.
I've now got market ready, electric, battery powered, up to like 24 tons.
Yeah.
Are these realistic, Callum, or are these just
Yeah,
prototypes?
certainly on the Liebherr perspective, it's totally realistic. This technology is something that Liebherr's been pioneering in their cranes for a few years now, and they've really just scaled it down for excavators, material handlers, loading shovels, things like that. Definitely works. Certainly on the excavator side of things, they've gone down the route of removable battery packs.
Makes sense.
And the whole ethos is that the machine must do a day of work on one charge, one battery pack. So I mean that makes sense, you know.
Yeah.
But the questions are around, in our application, where do we charge them, or how do we lift the battery pack off and take it back to a charging point? And so there's still some gaps there that are needing filled, but the raw technology and the equipment has definitely come to the fore. Volvo as well have been pioneers on the electric side, probably more so than any manufacturer. And when you look at their dump trucks, their loading shovels, and their excavators, they're streets ahead of probably most people in the market. Although certainly on the heavy side, they tend to have gone down the fuel cell route, which has its pros and its cons as well. You know, it's cost prohibitive. You know, it's 3.5 times the price of the machine, and it brings just brings a lot more challenges.
I did also notice in one of the magazines there, maybe they'll become a future sponsor of these podcasts, who knows, but that Aggregate Industries have got a front shovel working on one of their facilities, working very well. Probably a bit like our electric Volvo timber trucks. There would have been a lot of hesitation, a lot of doubt around it, but now they've actually got it working. It seems to be working very well for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's Chinese, I think.
A Lugong, Lugong. Great looking machine, but again, that application lends itself perfectly well. That shovel will be working in a quarry environment or a ship loading environment at the harbour side,
where there's
infrastructure there. So you know that's just a no-brainer for them to adopt that sort of technology.
Yeah. Well, just to touch on our Volvo, so the Volvo 6 and drag timber lorry, it's doing like 16, 17 mile round trip, so loaded one way, it's getting 25 tons of wood on, no crane of course, being loaded by the dockside equipment, but it's managing about 7 trips before it needs a top-up recharge, then comes in for an hour-long quick charge, and it can do another 3 trips, sees it through to the evening. It can then recharge probably in about 2.5 to 3 hours, so it could run a night shift if it was required to with that charging gap, and I think it surprised everyone at how effective it is. So if you've got the infrastructure, which we're talking about ports, industrial facilities, the gap is closing and these things are becoming realistic. Price, well, that's a different matter. We'll talk about another time, but it is realistic. So the next kind of angle, so electric works, we know that. If you've got the power on a site, that'll work. I know a subject that you're passionate about, not least because it's JCB and you're a big JCB fan, but it's hydrogen. I'm not a massive hydrogen fan at the moment. I think it's a difficult resource to store. It's very small molecularly, very difficult to store under pressure, very difficult to transport. I think nobody's really looked, closely at that. I know there are some companies, HVS trucks, etc., going down this line, and we're all talking about fuel cells. But one thing of real interest is the JCB option, which is you're burning the hydrogen in a combustion engine. They've put a lot of money into it, and I know you know a bit about that. Once that engine is fully developed, of course, it can be dropped into anything. In fact, I think JCB have got one in a van.
Yes, that's right.
And so tell us a bit about the JCB project.
I feel like I'm speaking for JCB on behalf of them here.
Hey,
but
JCB, if you're listening, come on board as a sponsor.
But no, I mean, JCB have invested £100 million in hydrogen technology, in research and development. And back in 2019, they originally started looking at fuel cell technology. Probably, as most people would have done then, just Google hydrogen and find out what the solution is and just action that. But it became quite apparent that hydrogen fuel cells perhaps weren't the solution for large-scale equipment. And like what we were saying about Liebherr earlier on, the prime concern is that the equipment must run for a day of work on the fuel. So,
of course, one thing I would say, and the forestry guys listening will say, a civil's construction site could be 8 or 9 hours. As we know in the forest, that could be 14 hours.
Absolutely, 100%.
That's an immediate constraint difference.
But like I was saying a second ago, mindset's a big problem, right?
Yeah.
So the low-hanging fruit there was hydrogen combustion engine. And they've developed or redeveloped their own diesel engine to work on hydrogen. And it seems to be a success. I believe they've done about 50 to 60 units of that engine now, which are in long-term
working out in the field.
in their quarry under test.
Right.
And it definitely ticks the box. It ticks the box because the operative is used to filling the machine up with fuel. Refilling a machine is going to take 4 to 7 minutes, not 2.5 hours or 40 minutes. So that's a tick box. And from a maintenance perspective as well, it's not new technology. You've still got oil to change, an oil filter. It's tried and tested.
It's an engine. It's a combustion engine.
Exactly. It's it'll work in the environment. Dusty, dirty. So total no-brainer. And I was quite pleased to see the likes of Liebherr taking that on as well. They've developed a hydrogen combustion engine too.
Oh, right. Okay.
They launched it a year ago at Bauma.
Yeah.
And
Cummins, I think, as well have done some.
Cummins have, Deutz have.
Yeah, so it's
Caterpillar just now are embarking on a 3-year project for hydrogen combustion engines. But something that interested me about Liebherr was they're also developing a hydrogen / diesel dual fuel, or they're marketing it as a HVO and hydrogen dual fuel engine.
Right.
Which I can only presume, I haven't drilled into it too much, but I can only presume it's hydrogen injection to get that last 10% of emissions down to...
to burn that off.
Yeah,
we've heard about that. Which is a simple system. It's like a box, and if anyone knows of the old Yamaha power valves, used to have the YPVS box, recirculates and re-puts that combustion mix through to get that extra burn.
It's absolutely not new technology by any means. No. And in terms of, creating that hydrogen for that system, that's totally practical.
Yeah.
We can do that today. So that's a good solution for today.
And I think some of our listeners who are operating forestry plant and equipment, whether it be portside with a Liebherr or halfway up the hill in a John Deere harvester or anything similar, they're probably thinking all this tech that's coming at them, things have gone too far as it is. I mean, AdBlue was a big change 6-7 years ago, and it has given us nothing but grief across the sector. I think, as we've discussed, batteries, that sort of tech, scary, high voltages in the forest, etc.
Fire risk, with the lithium batteries.
Yeah. And then if we're going to go down, fuel cell, again, complicated, fragile, probably not going to take the harsh conditions and heavy duty of forest apps. But clean burn, hydrogen combustion, it's very akin to diesel, just at higher pressures, etc. Maybe that's the way we'll end up going. Storage is an issue, etc.
Storage, transporting it to the forest.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unanswered questions, and as I demonstrated to you earlier on in the year when you had your Irish visitors over, I gave the example of the hydrogen Bowser, which was essentially a converted diesel Bowser, but at a cost of £100,000 for a Bowser that contains enough fuel to run a machine for 1 day.
Yeah, no, that's not going to work.
It's just pie in the sky. So
it's not going to work.
There's a long way to go on that front.
I think the forestry sector, and by this I mean some of the bigger players, could put their shoulder to the wheel and help with the development costs, because ultimately forestry is the original and best green industry. We're growing trees, we're locking up carbon, we're essentially harvesting that carbon, transporting logs, which are lumps of carbon, to be locked, stored into products and locked up. So really, it's a win-win. If we could be harvesting that with zero emission or reduced emission green equipment, it's a great story and one I think should be pursued. But the one thing we haven't talked about in terms of alternative fuels is HVO. And obviously, you mentioned low-hanging fruit, and HVO must be the lowest. I mean, if it's low-hanging fruit, it's grown on the ground. I mean, HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil. So it's a vegetable oil. And available now. A lot of people are switching over to it. Reduces, tell me more, I know you know about the science, reduces emissions of CO2 by about 80%.
Yeah, 80 to 90%.
I mean, that's massive.
Huge. Nobody can argue with it. It's that much of a positive impact. You wonder why everybody's not using it. You wonder why the government hasn't got behind it and subsidised its use.
Yeah. Absolutely. As you know, here at Creel, we're great believers in it. So we ran a Berlingo van. One of our managers had that. Absolutely no issues. You can mix HVO straight in if you run short of it. You can't buy it at the pumps yet, but you can put standard diesel in when you get back to your yard, put your HVO in. And that kind of spurred us on. So the John Deere 1210G that we're running on a barge project, it's running on pure HVO, never missed a beat. We're buying that through Oilfast, remember that, down in Oban. Deliveries are fine, supply's been fine. We're paying for it. It's probably 10p a litre dearer than white. Now that's going to be a problem for some of our guys who are currently red, but tell us more about
that. Yeah, you just know exactly where I'm going with that. You know, there is a not even a shortage, but there is no red HVO available north of about Manchester.
Yeah, crazy.
Because there seems to be no demand, but you know, we know there's a demand. We just need to demonstrate there's a demand for it.
But if that red was at a red price, a rebated price,
well, that's exactly that's exactly the difference. It is rebated by 46 pence per litre, or 46 point whatever. So it's substantially less, but without the industry demonstrating the demand, the fuel store won't be there. Now, I know that some suppliers are looking at putting in red HVO storage in Scotland, but I think it's really up to, as an industry, to lead that. And forestry is one of the last sectors entitled to use rebated fuel.
Exactly.
So, you know, I think it really needs to get its ducks in a row to demonstrate what the potential is here, because there's a huge environmental benefit to it. And if it's demonstrated, then there's a huge cost saving to be made too.
But I think everybody in the forest sector, and I've delivered this message at talks, I think at the last Timber Transport Conference, but really from contractors through to timber management companies, everyone's driving Hilux pickups these days. Get them onto HVO.
Absolutely.
You don't need to be thinking about electric this or hydrogen that or fuel cell that. You could switch tomorrow, put a fuel tank into your office, run an HVO, and your fleet will be 90% cleaner. Equally, if you want to do a big picture maths on it all, you're not building another brand new vehicle with batteries, with heavy metals. It's an existing vehicle.
Yeah. The greenest thing that can be done is exactly that.
Convert what you have.
Yeah, 100%. It just makes total sense. And when we've got a direct drop-in fuel solution like HVO, just use it.
Yeah, no, we need to talk more about it. And I think if the forestry guys, and what I'm thinking about here is going forward, whether it's haulage, okay, that'll be white. If it's timber harvesting, that could be rebated fuel. Everybody will know that in tenders these days, people are looking for what are your green credentials, what you're doing with the environmental stuff. And if you can see you're running your fleet, your assets on HVO, that's a massive boost. You're reducing those emissions. And that can be done, low-hanging fruit. Red has to be red. No one's going to pay for expensive HVO, but that's going to be a great step forward. And I think that's a positive way probably to wrap this first edition up. It's been a great wee chat. I've really enjoyed it. I hope the listeners have too. I want people to message in with topics. Some of the topics we're going to cover over the coming weeks will be new machinery, will be issues facing operators out in the forest, especially in the winter, dark nights, we all hate it. Timber hauliers, conditions, all sorts, new kit, new machinery. Listen, right down to welfare. Nobody likes to talk about it, especially us blokes.
Controversial one.
Yeah, very controversial. We touched on a few things earlier. We're not going to go into that just now. So there's a wide range of stuff, and I hope people find this beneficial. You're sitting in a machine on the hillside, you're driving a truck. This is for you guys, so we want to hear your thoughts, and we'll take it on from there. Callum, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks, Neil.
Take care.